about this afternoon in the hay shed to do the pigerator compost. So we didn't get into pigs to raise pigs to sell pork. We got into pigs to not have to use machinery and petroleum to turn compost. And of course then the pigs, what happened was the pigs were so good that everybody wanted more pigs. And so then we got into pig business. You know, that's the difference between a hold-on and an economic enterprise. A hold-on is something that turns a waste stream into a profit center, and an enterprise is something that has to stand alone on its own 2 feet. So then, once we got into pigs, we said, well, how are we going to raise these things? And of course, in keeping with all of our other thinking, it was not going to be in a confinement house. And so, so this is the first one we built out here. So this was our trial. So this one's been a continuous pig pasture now for 20 years. So this was forest, just like over there. That was just deep forest like what you see around. We came in and we cut off the trees. You can still see, you know, some of the stumps around, and sold for firewood, took it out for firewood. And then we made a lot of mistakes. So there's several critical elements going on here. This feeder becomes a constant. So the biggest mistakes that people make with this, and that we made as well, is to either create too much disturbance or not enough disturbance. There's a sweet spot of disturbance, and we've got to start with the disturbance, because so many times people think that, you know, environmental disturbance is a bad thing. But the fact is that all succession and germination requires disturbance. You know, this is true spiritually. You know, you can't be saved till you're lost. You can't have a good marriage until you have disturbing conversations, right? If you can't have a disturbing conversation, you'll just kind of exist, but you won't. Are you with me? All right. You know, Einstein said, you know, before there can be construction, there must be destruction. You read business books, you know, sacred cows make the best burgers. And if you worked in a great big corporation, you know how bureaucratic it can become, and you know, with protocols and paperwork, and we've always done it this way, and this sort of thing. And so, you know, if you're going to build a house, first thing that happens is a big argument about what the house is going to look like and how it's going to be situated, right? And they say if a marriage can stand a house building, it's probably good to go, you know? And so we know about this, and yet we live in a time when there's this kind of, you know, universal idea that that for us to disturb nature is somehow inherently bad. Now, it can be bad, but it's not inherently bad. And you know, if I might go where angels fear to tread, I mean, that's the problem with both the Obama and the Bush and the Obama, get them in sequential, right sequence, bailout plans, is that they did not allow the level of disturbance that was necessary to truly germinate a new construct, you know, a new thing. You know, the Egyptians have the phoenix rising out of the ashes. Everybody loves to look at that beautiful phoenix, but nobody loves to talk about the ashes that were required, you know, for that phoenix to rise out of the ashes. So this disturbance is the precursor to moving the ecology somewhere. And if the disturbance is too much, it can move the ecology backwards, whether it's erosion or, in this case, where you're trying to make pig pastures, just toward weeds and things. If it's not enough disturbance, then it's not enough to arrest the desire of our ecology to move to forest. And so then you get brambles and you get brush and all that stuff coming back in. So there's a sweet spot of disturbance. You want just enough but not too much. You know, The Marines have the saying, pain is weakness leaving the body. You know, but you don't want so much pain that it kills you. All right. So there's a sweet spot of disturbance, and so and we have been on both ends of that spectrum here. So. So what we did was we cut the trees, and we started the pigs running through. These are roughly quarter-acre paddocks. We now use half-acre paddocks, and so we're not quite filling the feeder. Over there where we were at Briarmore yesterday, those were all half-acre paddocks. We use the 2-ton feeder. Here we just don't fill it all the way up a lot of times to try to create the right amount of disturbance. For here is a ton of feed per quarter acre, or 2 tons per half acre. That seems to be the right amount. The point being that 50 pigs that are 80 pounds for 10 days are the same disturbance as 50 pigs that are 160 pounds for 5 days. Did you follow that? So the feed becomes our constant. And the reason I stress that is because it's too easy to fudge. Trust me. It doesn't suit us to move them today. Let's just take them another barrel of feed. All right? And so what happens is that most outdoor pig operations are over impacting the land. And what you don't have is nice pastures that the pigs are on. What you have are simply a moonscape. And that's frankly, something that really scares me because that was what created the hog cholera outbreaks and the things in the 1920s. What happened at that time was that the very dispersed, pigs weren't fed grain, or certainly not much grain, until very, very recent times because grain was too expensive. And so when George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the colonials had pigs, pigs were historically kind of scavengers, and that's why in the Andalusian area of Spain and the Iberian Peninsula, they grew up on cork tree acorns, and here, they grew up on the American chestnut was the primary thing. But pigs have always kind of been like the chickens; they're omnivores, and so they were close to homesteads as a scavenger of waste. They grew out in the edges of the forest. The beauty of the pigs is they're not so predator prone like a chicken, and so you could put them out in outlying areas to scavenge nuts and persimmons and things like that. That was their role. And in order to raise pigs like that, it necessarily required a very low stock density. Okay, lots of it. It was a land extensive system. All right. Well, now that we can supplement with grain, obviously, we can create a land-intensive system. So as grain cheapened and as mechanization and cheap energy came on to cheapen grain in the turn of the century, what happened was these farms that used to have just a handful of pigs on extensive acreage as scavengers of the outlying areas started to bring them in tighter and confine them and feed them grain, but without the benefit of vaccines, medications, concrete, deep bedding. There were no chippers, there wasn't a rural electrification. I mean, there wasn't even clean water because they didn't have pipes. I mean, imagine living in a day before plastic pipe. I mean, think about how you would get good, clean water to stock and things when there was no pipe. Okay, so what happened was in the early industrialization of farming, pigs were beginning to be concentrated outdoors in lots prior to all the sanitation and infrastructure that was necessary to allow that to happen. And we had massive hog cholera outbreaks. And today, whenever you say you're raising pigs outdoors, the industry will crucify you for, oh, you want to bring back hog cholera, destroy, pork production and threaten the planet's food supply, whatever, all the Chinese will starve if they don't have pork. goo pond, whatever. So it's not every day I've got somebody from China here to play to have fun with, right? So I'm having fun with the airlines, I'm having fun with the Chinese, it's all good. All right. So what we have now, and just imagine trying to keep pigs in prior to electric fence. I mean, you had to build a Maginot line, right? And it worked about as good as the Maginot line. So what we have today is electric fence, and we have water in a pipe. There's the water waterer down there at the bottom, and there's another pond up ahead of us that gravity feeds water down, and we have valves at each of these little sections, so that we can rotate these pigs. So you can see they came up a couple of weeks ago. They started in that first paddock, then they went to the second paddock. Now they're in this paddock, then they'll go in that paddock, and there's, I don't know, 6 or 7 paddocks here. When we go downhill, I'm hoping to leave here in enough time that I'm going to add a stop to this time bend, that TSI pig pasture, to stop at this end and walk it back through to see the recuperating paddocks, and we'll come around the other side. So when we stop there, I'm trying to make time to do that. While we're doing that, I'll have you run the 2 tractors up to meet us at the other end of the horseshoe. But it's really, it's like a time warp to be able to walk those paddocks back and see literally the stair steps of recuperation in each of those paddocks. And the reason that they recuperate like this is because we're only in a given one for a very short period of time. So we only touch one 3 times a season. That's the most we'll touch them. And we vary. Sometimes, like next year when we come up with the first batch of pigs here, we'll start down in that paddock and run them this way. Again, it's to diversify the sequence so that in the calendar year, different species are reaching physiological expression at different times of the year to stimulate a diverse sward. A couple of logistic things here. When the pigs